Chuck, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brett. Really nice to be here and see some old friends and hopefully make some new friends today as well. And by the way, I hope to learn as well while we're here for this session. When Brett called and asked if we would do this, I said most certainly. I'd be happy to share information that we've been working on in this space for, well, since 2019. And so what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about the firm, a little bit about what we're doing, perhaps, a couple examples of things that we have touched in terms of vertiport design, and then look at what might be coming down the road as well. So let me just move on from here, but let me read this. Once you have tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will long to return. It's a shame nobody speaks like that anymore, but it was just delightful. So I wanted to share that a little bit with you, tell you a little bit about us. We're headquartered in Warren, New Jersey, which is where the star is in the middle of the state. Firm started in '62. We have almost 300 staff arrayed amongst numerous offices. We have 9 regional offices, as you see here throughout New Jersey, lower New York or downstate New York, Connecticut. North Carolina is a new office that just opened, and we've been in Houston for about a year. We're architects and engineers and environmental scientists. That's what we do. We have been doing for quite some time. We serve both public and private clients, and I'll share with you some of the sectors in just a moment. And as Brett had mentioned, we stood up our task force back in 2019. So we provide these services: architecture, interior design, site and civil engineering, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineering, the environmental sciences, GIS, cultural resources survey, all of those elements, as well as energy services too. The business sectors that we serve include education, energy and utility, healthcare, which is where I come from when I first joined the firm, hospitality, public works, real estate and residential, science, technology, pharmaceuticals, life sciences, projects like that. And our newer sector, urban air mobility, which I'm proud to share with you right now. Our task force are all of these smiling folks in front of you right here. Ted Osborne is our executive vice president for the company. There's me. Jennifer Ganley is a project manager in the architectural group, as is Dan Balto, a senior director. Blake Sherwood, senior architect, he's up in New York. And Steve Ewing is not an architect. He's on the energy and utility side, and he also has a pretty strong background in acoustics as well. When we look at these elements, I guess, of society, every era, every epoch, every time frame, folks have written about how their cities are becoming untenable, whether you're looking at stories from Roman times or right up through today, where we're saddled with things like congestion and pollution, perhaps a diminished quality of life, yes, traffic, noise, certainly, and that's going to play a part in our discussion today, leading to stress to the individual. And so folks are putting a lot of energy to reshape ourselves. And after the climate conference of the past 2 weeks, let's hope that there is a real effort there. So some of these lofty goals, like having a simpler life, cleaner cities, perhaps safer, improve our quality, lessen traffic congestion, maximize our well-being. All of these are very strong elements for society to attain, and urban air mobility is not going to change every one of them, but I think we're certainly going to contribute to that. And I believe you're going to hear more information in that regard as we go through this today. And here's just a few Vertiport concepts that we've been working with, everything from what you might call a napkin sketch up to some photorealistic studies atop buildings here in New Jersey, just so we in the task force are looking at the variety of elements that need to be brought into building design solutions, where indeed there are buildings as part of this, and we'll get into a little bit more of that. They were just concepts. This was a real project, and Eric is going to remember this. Back in 2019, 2020, Uber Elevate authorized PS&S to be their architect of record for this vertiport atop a 14-story parking garage in downtown Los Angeles. We sent a team out there, we surveyed the building, came back with drawings, did a structural analysis of the building, saw what we had to do to create a new flight deck there, elevate and create a new terminal. You see two views of that, a pilot's perspective approaching, and a view from the terminal side looking down at Interstate 10 there, going through the city. And then there's a small shot of the passenger safety walking area under a somewhat diaphanous canopy there, keeping folks under cover for just a little bit. And then if you look down on the ground level where it's illuminated down there, you'll see that's where the intake occurred, where folks would drive in, drive through, be dropped off, come through a reception and security, board their elevator, their secure elevator to the flight deck level, and be escorted out to the aircraft there. This included one landing spot or FATO, final approach and takeoff landing area, 4 parking areas with recharging, and the terminal in the center, as you see there. So, and of course, Uber exited this space in late 2020. And so the project stopped, but along the way, I think that we learned a great deal, solved a lot of the issues that were endemic to a process like this. So it was really a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We also did some light concept work for Veyron Vehicles, now Veyron Corporation in Colombia, South America. And they asked us to do just a single portable, if you will, vertiport that could be used in a variety of instances. And we see here, you know, an urban context, suburban, and a waterside development for Veyron to begin to study their ecosystem, and if we remain engaged with Veyron right now. As far as the industry is concerned, Brett had talked about some of these things with our NASA Association, Vertical Flight, NBAA, Joint Air Mobility, and Veyron Corporation remain strategic partners, as does our friend Rex Alexander from 5 Alpha, and his former partner Ray Sims from Heli Experts right here in New Jersey. And we are also exploring some interesting concepts here on the East Coast with Ray. He mentioned our panelist discussions. I sit on the board of the American Helicopter Museum and Educational Center. We just wrapped up our yearly activities and GAT 25th Anniversary Gala. And he already mentioned that we are advisors to the various groups at Atlantic City. Let me tell you very quickly, that's the National Institute of Aerospace, the Smart Airport and Aviation Partnership, the National Aviation Research Technology Park, the Atlantic County Economic Alliance, and ACY, of course, is the airport identifier. Very proud of that association too. So looking ahead, there are a number of things that we see on the horizon that actually have been with us since the inception of ideas and the elemental structure of air mobility, is that aircraft are being now developed. You see Joby's right there. Systems maturation will have to take place. That's not only the operational system, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but also everything that accompanies that as well. Operational regulations and certifications. The OEMs that were here with you today will speak more about the development and certification process, but regulations are part and parcel of this very intensive developmental segment of aircraft, bringing aircraft to the market. Vertiport design standards, the FAA is working on them right now. We understand they still may be a couple years off, But in the meantime, we are looking at the previous heliport standards. The FAA points us to that as interim guidelines. Certainly nothing that is regulatory right now, but they are coming, as is airspace regulations as well. Bear in mind that our national airspace system operates with a high degree of reliability and safety, and does a really, really phenomenal job handling tens of thousands of events daily throughout the country. It's an extraordinary piece of work. Integrating this new enterprise of air mobility into the national airspace system is supposed to be handled and done in such a way that it's a minimal impact on our air traffic controllers. I think there's certainly going to be some collaboration in that regard. I think there has to be, but the idea is to provide service providers, that's urban air mobility, air traffic service providers, who will handle the operational characteristics of the complexity that we see coming with air mobility at low levels. Air traffic control corridors and routings, whether or not we have corridors, I think certainly we can bank on some element of routing into our low-level airspace systems. And by the way, that may include, entry in and out of our highly densified Class Bravo and even Class Charlie and Delta airspace airports, where there already are cutouts and floors and ceilings in the inverted wedding cake, shall we say, of a typical Class Bravo airspace containment. So we need not avoid them, but I think that conversations in that area, if we're looking at designing vertiports in or near the presence of a Class Bravo, will be a well-placed effort. And this may not be the elephant in the room, but certainly high energy electric availability and cost and the extension of that and everything that it requires is a separate subject all to itself, but is something that we are cognizant of and must be involved with as we plan our vertiports of the future. And Yolanda, I know, is going to be talking much more about this, but it's my contention that I think it's going to be very hard to get public acceptance without first having public assurance. And I think that public assurance has to come from government, from the regulators, has to come from industry. It has to come from our risk evaluators. It has to come from public advocacy groups. And I think that the safety and security aspects that need to be put to this are really, must be of a very high order. I know that our aircraft OEMs are very, very cognizant of this. I think they're working very, very hard to address all of the elements that are affected by this. Certainly works into how local municipalities and cities are going to adopt zoning ordinances that would allow these spot airports, if you will, these vertiports, whether they're on the ground, atop buildings, adjacent to malls, waterside, wherever they may be, the ordinances must be written to accept them. They should be developed thoughtfully, and I think that's where all of us can help contribute to that as well. We already mentioned the prime importance of safety and security, not only operationally throughout the system, but also in our buildings, in our terminals, in our facilities, from curbside all the way up to the flight deck. That kind of throughput must also be on the highest order as well. Industry support, I mean, the aviation industry is one of collectivism for sure. And I'm sure any of our speakers today will attest to that. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of parts and vendors, equipment suppliers, maintainers, supply chain that's very deep and very broad and wide. And that will translate into, I think, an increased robust activity in our existing aviation support network, as well as create new enterprises as well. And that's a job creation, and that's a good thing. And I think the governments and the county economic alliances and agencies are looking at that very, very strongly and very excited about the potential for bringing these kinds of enterprises for the good of all in support of this. And there's access for all. And that simply isn't, what the price point is going to be. We'll let the manufacturers talk to, startup costs and where it becomes at scale later on down the road. But also from a human access, that is, and something we are involved with all the time, is accessibility to our buildings. So again, once again, curbside to flight deck, we have to make sure that that these systems, these vertiports, and its entire creation inside the envelope does indeed provide access to all. Folks with difficulty walking, perhaps even difficulty seeing, we must accommodate them in this space. And I know everyone is working hard to make sure that inclusiveness is there. You already heard Hani mention some of the multi-mission activities that we see, a lot of which is being covered by helicopters right now. But I think that many of these use cases can indeed be shared, certainly at a more economical and certainly at a quieter basis, even at the expense perhaps of payload of these smaller vehicles at the moment, entering the airspace. But we're looking at everything from on-demand passenger, scheduled passenger, light cargo and freight, observation, first responder, medical, healthcare, transport of all kinds, news, observation, inspection, governmental. The list goes on and on. Anywhere that we think that society can be helped in any given area by the use of a quiet machine like this, or a network of it, by a variety of different entities, is extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. And it's something that we all have our eye on and are planning for. And these are terribly exciting times. Certainly the promise of cleaner and quieter are two of the principal elements of air mobility. And it's something that I think that the public is going to come to appreciate. I think it is real. I don't think that there is hype here, and more and more information is coming online that shows how cleaner and quieter is part of what the projection is in this industry. I want to finish with just a quick comparison. Everybody's very familiar with helicopters for the most part, but here's a little differential table. On the pro side for our helicopters, high payloads, the capacity of helicopters to carry great loads is certainly there and has been for quite some time by virtue of their engineering, by virtue of their powerful engines, and of course their hallmark, the capability of vertical takeoff and landing. And they serve multiple roles, many of which I already mentioned that will become roles for eVTOL use cases. But they come with high noise profiles for the most part, by those powerful engines, by those massive rotors, those articulating rotors, and by the anti-torque propellers in the back, some folks call, tail rotors. They generate a different kind of buzz, and the airframe produces some kind of noise. So all of that contributes to the unique characteristics of what we hear with helicopters. And you either love it, you tolerate it, or you hate it. It's one of the things that our friends in that community are faced with all the time. Helicopters are strange beasts in how they fly, how they operate, and it takes a great deal of training and skill to be masters of that. And they can be somewhat expensive to operate. On the other side, our electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft work through distributed electric propulsion of many different kinds. You're going to see a couple today in just a little bit that produce zero carbon in their emissions. Also capable, of course, of vertical takeoff and landing, and can provide every one of the roles that I mentioned earlier and more, for sure, given their size right now. And what size are we talking about? Well, perhaps if we're looking at a 3, 4, or 5 passenger cabin with pilot at this time, Our payload might be anywhere from 1,000 pounds to maybe 15 or 1,600 pounds of payload, and that can be verified by our speakers later on too. But let's say it's in that general area. Operationally, it might be complex by virtue of the airspace that needs to be created for this enterprise to work in our airspace system at relatively low levels in and across our urban environments, from part of network stations to and fro, part of the mesh that gets developed. It all has to be intelligently worked out, lots and lots of collaboration, lots and lots of avionics that talk to each other to make all this work. Range of these are going to be initially limited, but every quarter you look at the advances that are being made in battery technology, battery chemistry, battery management, and how all of this is being pulled together to make an even better scenario and safe scenario for our all-electric vehicles. It's not only capacity, it's also battery condition and battery health. And I'm not the expert on this, you have to look elsewhere for that, but one of our partners, BAE Systems, has been very strong in that regards, and we learn a lot from them and from others. And of course, they require high energy recharging, perhaps not at every vertiport out there that's in the system, but to some degree, charging is part and parcel of how these work. So there is a great deal of potential. There is a great deal of energy. There is a great deal of funding that is going on. This is a global phenomenon. It is happening virtually on every continent, perhaps with the exception of Antarctica right now, anyway. And it's an extraordinary time to be part of this nascent enterprise that may have had its roots decades ago, but it certainly has come to the point of development that is real. It's coming, it's palpable, it's tangible. You can reach out and touch it, and you're seeing more and more of it every day. And I look forward to the presentation by others. So with that, just a little, let me continue this way. Thank you so much for this opportunity. There goes a little aircraft across the screen. And I didn't think I heard any heads hitting the table, so I hope everybody came through that. Okay, back to you, Brett.